Greetings, MacNNers. It's time once again for your podcast and ours, episode 57 of the MacNN Podcast. Welcome back, MacNNers. Always a pleasure to have you with us. I'm Charles Martin. I'm the editor of MacNN, and this week I am coming to you live from Orlando, Florida. Yeah, all right. I am moving around the country again. Oh, it feels good. It's a little muggy here, actually, but I did say Orlando. Not only that, but we're recording this podcast tonight on an extremely auspicious occasion, the actual 40th anniversary of Apple. April 1st is when we're recording this, and this is not just Apple's exact 40th anniversary, but it is part of MacNN's 20th anniversary year. The original first day of MacNN operation is shrouded in a bit of mystery, but we do know that a young college student named Monish turned the server on. Would have been 20 years last June, exactly. And so we've, like the Queen, we've been celebrating it all year long.
Yeah, why not just roll through this entire year with MacNN 20th anniversary celebrations?
Yeah, why not? I want to spend just a moment on this, actually. We'll get to Apple in a second. You know, it's another anniversary for them. But for us, this is a really big deal because there are very few websites covering Apple news that are still around.
Oh, no, dropping like flies the last 5 years.
At this point, I think it's us and Tidbits. I think that's about it.
It's us and Tidbits and 9 to 5 Mac Rumors, and Apple Insider.
Have they all been around 20 years? I don't think so.
Oh, no, us and Tidbits. We're the old men.
Yeah.
Apple Insider is a couple years behind us, and 9 to 5 is a couple years behind that, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. Punk kids. They saw what we were doing, us and Tidbits, and they went, hey, we want a piece of that action.
Well, I believe other than Tidbits, we have the oldest staff as well. Well, no, I mean, that gives us historical perspective.
That's true.
I had an Apple II. My family computer was an Apple II.
My original family computer was a TRS-80. I am very old. It's true.
So, you know, my first Mac was a Mac SE that I bought with my own money. Thank you.
I bought an SE30 with my own money. That was the first one I bought, yeah.
And a few years after that was a Mac Classic II.
Yeah. I think the next new Mac that I bought was a 6100.
Okay.
But that was quite a while later.
Let's see. I'm trying to think if there's anything after the Classic II that I got before the 6100. Yes, a 475, a Performa 475.
Oh, my first newsroom in college had a bunch of those.
Well, why not? They were 68040 LCs.
Yeah, and, you know, they were pizza boxes. That's what we called them.
It was a nice little machine. It was my first experience my first owned experience with the Apple in color.
Yeah.
And after that was a 6100 and had that for many, many years until I got a 6360, which is a 603E machine.
Right. I update less often than you. The next new Mac that I bought was, ironically, one that I had railed about being so ugly earlier, the white iMac.
Okay.
The all-white iMac. When I first saw it at a Macworld, I was just like, geez Louise, this is ugly.
I'm trying to think if there's any color combination I really liked or really hated in the G3 iMacs, and I think I really liked the ruby one.
Yes, that was a beautiful, classy model. But for some reason, when I saw it later, when I was ready to buy, I was going to get a ruby one, in fact, and I thought, oh, you know what? That white one is not quite so clear, and I kind of like that idea, you know?
Sucked in.
Yeah, I think we were all united, though, that we didn't like the orange one, and later the psychedelic barf one.
The 90s were interesting time for me because I was forward deployed on the USS Hyman G. Rickover, SSN 709, now officially Razor Blades. And on my first deployment to the Mediterranean, I brought a Mac Portable.
Oh, I remember those.
A Mac Portable and an Apple II bag. How about that? Yeah, well, you had to. I mean, the thing was a slab. Let's see. The deployment after that was a northern run. We went to the North Atlantic, and I had a 540C, and I want to say it was a 603 chip upgrade inside of it.
Wow.
And the deployment after that was a 3400.
Goodness, I wish I could remember all the different Macs I've owned. I know I lusted after a Macintosh 2 VX very much, but I couldn't get one.
Oh, I did too. I didn't have the money for it at the time.
And I always wanted a Color Classic too, for no practical reason. Just, you know, I thought it was a pretty cool idea to see my first bought computer, Mac being a SE30. I always thought, you know, seeing a color screen in that space would be kind of cool. So the thing that Mike and I are getting around to here is that we've been around for much of Apple's history. And this does give us, I think, a little perspective. Obviously, we're still not great on calling rumors, but that's because that's future stuff. Past stuff we know all about.
I think we are still colored by the last 30 years of computer hardware, and maybe perhaps we haven't quite figured out the mobile rumors quite so much yet.
Yeah, very much.
I think that's got more to do with it yet, because the mobile's on a different cycle, right? The iPhone and the iPads are on a slightly different cycle with different needs, and I think that sometimes when we evaluate the rumors, we paint it with a Mac-colored brush.
Yes, we definitely do come from the traditional Mac school, where even this whole idea of yearly operating system upgrades doesn't sit well with us, because in my day, we used to wait 3 years and pay $129 when we had the chance.
That is a little wacky.
I remember standing in line at a store outside Pittsburgh for, I'm going to say 10.3, I think it was. It was just released.
Oh, God. How many years was I using Mac OS 6? I want to say 4?
I mean, standing in line for the release of an OS. Remember those days?
Mm-hmm. Not well. I have done it on occasion, but I always let other people get flaming data for me, and I've actually used that phrase in a couple of articles.
Yes, you have. But one of the things that we like about this is that when a historical perspective is needed, we have it. And luckily, it being Apple's 40th anniversary today, this is one of those occasions where we get to pull out some of this knowledge.
And they are currently having a party right now. They're having a beer fest.
Ah, yes.
With Billy Zane DJing from Beats One.
Well, of course he is.
As we speak, the party goes on.
And they flew the pirate flag. I'm not sure if it was the actual pirate flag.
Our reports are mixed on that.
Or a replica of the original pirate flag, but close enough, man. The important thing is they hoisted the Jolly Roger. Andy Hirschfeld has published a little story about the history of that flag. And it's not if you read the story, it's not quite as rebellious as it turns out to be. But it's based on two things. One was they were occupying a new building. And the second thing is a quote from Steve Jobs, which he almost certainly took from somewhere because it is very familiar to me. And that is, it's better to be a pirate than to join the Navy.
Well, with practical experience with that, but no actual piracy experience, I'm not sure I agree with that. I guess I can judge, workplace safety based on deadliest catch versus my Navy experience. I don't know. I mean, I don't even know what parallels I would draw to that.
Well, I think he was trying to motivate the troops that they were rebels, that they were doing something outside the usual channels.
They were an enclave of Macdom in an Apple II company.
Yeah. Although at the stage that they actually were, they were a well-established company by this point.
Yes.
Had been very successful with the Apple II, as you mentioned. William Gallagher has been putting together a series all this year of week-by-week Apple history. And there is some amazing stuff in there. We've mentioned it before. But he really outdid himself on Friday with the 40th anniversary one. And we came up with 40 figures, starting with 0 and going all the way up to 1,591,092,250. And yet just 40 figures that sort of tell some of the big stories about Apple. Also, as if I couldn't get you to read this just on those merits, inside this article, you will discover the reason why Johnny Ive shaves his hair.
Oh, that dude had hair.
Seriously.
Wow, did that dude have hair?
I was scrolling through the article, as I generally do, and I read across that picture, and my brain went, hey, flock of seagulls, how's it going?
Nice.
I know, right? Anyway, so do take a look at it. It's called Happy Birthday Apple, the 40th Anniversary by the Numbers. And we just thought that was one way of celebrating the company's rich history.
It is probably my favorite entry in the series.
Yes, and I mean, all of them have been so good, but this one, we just really outdid ourselves there. So well done to William Gallagher, Employee of the Week, and there's going to be more and more of this very, very rich history coming the rest of the year. So please do keep an eye on the Apple history week by week, because it's really good stuff. This is the amazing thing. As I say, I lived through most of this, and yet I still learned things like the secret of Johnny Ive's hair. But moving on to Apple's 40th anniversary, one of the principal reasons why MacNN exists and why we're still here, kind of amazingly, is because of all the great stuff that has come down the pike. And when you look at Apple history this way, the thing that I get out of it is everybody has a hit to miss ratio, right? I tell jokes on stage sometimes. Not all of them land.
Really, I'm shocked.
A lot of them do, though, I'm very pleased to tell you, and I rarely, if ever, get tomatoes thrown at me, but not all of them land. Sometimes one that you thought was funny just goes completely flat. And when you look at the history of Apple failures versus the history of things that were either good or, as the company likes to go, insanely great, the ratio is really good. It's really good. I'll put it up against anybody's. Even the super successful companies like Google and Microsoft have had a lot of failures that you would rather forget about. And I'm sure Apple has many of those as well, but Apple fans never let them forget.
Well, let's talk about the company for a minute.
Yeah.
The company's had several major architecture and focus shifts in 40 years, as I would assume just about any company that's been around for 40 years has. They started with the Apple II series. They took a brief detour into Apple III, and that didn't really work out.
Right. And that's where it would have ended, right?
In parallel with the Apple III, they had the Macintosh, which came out with a stunning 72-dot per inch screen. You're laughing, but it was.
I know, but I'm just thinking about how far we've come.
Yeah. And then, not really, only 10 years later, they migrated to an entirely different chipset. They migrated away from complex instruction set and went to reduced instruction set with the PowerPC series chips.
Yeah.
With the 601 much later. Well, the 601 originally, with the 603 and 604 in later models. The G3 could have been the 605. Let's be frank.
Yeah.
The G3 is just it was a marketing thing more than anything else. They could have continued with the 60 whatevers, but they didn't. G3 and G4 came out. And then when Apple figured out, okay, we're having a performance issue and a production issue with Motorola and IBM and delivering fast enough G4s and G5s. And the G5s, in the grand scheme of things, didn't really last that long before they were supplanted by another major architecture change.
Huge. I mean, literally almost at the 0 and 1 level. That's how far this goes. I mean, they went from, was it Little Endian to Big Endian? I think it was.
I would have to look up the Endian issues, as I'm not a coder, but they shifted from the G4, G5 to Intel.
Yeah.
With an enormous performance boost for Intel native code. And frankly, it didn't take long to get everything shuffled over. But at the same time that this is going on, they're working on the iPod.
Yep.
The iPod turns into the iPod Touch, turns into the iPhone.
Well, it was a phenomenon on its own. It just took a little while to get boiling.
Right.
But it really, it took off once it finally took off.
And that now is the biggest percentage of Apple hardware sold by dollar value and by number of units shipped.
Yeah.
On the other hand, people are saying, well, you're forgetting about the Mac. And, well, they're not. They are selling more Macs now in a quarter than they ever have.
Yeah. When I first started working for MacNN, and I should mention this briefly, I worked at MacNN at the very early part of this century, and then I stopped for a while, and then I came back later. But I've sort of been around, and I've been a very loyal reader since really the very early days. And so I remember the days when 5 million Macs was the year's output. In fact, that would have been an exceptional
2004.
Yeah, right. And now we're selling that many in a quarter, and that's an off quarter. Also, we mentioned this last week, but it is, even though the numbers don't, pale in comparison to the iPhone, it is still growing in a market that's contracting.
Yeah.
Really, that's the surprising story. I think, as we've talked about on other episodes, more and more people are starting to realize that they don't need what Steve Jobs called a truck, a full-blown computer. A lot of them can get by on less devices. That's why the shift to mobile, really, which started when mobile was considered underpowered compared to desktops. Now it's more or less evened out. But for the Mac to continue to do so well and to continue to have a halo effect that draws people in. I was telling Mike before this call started that I'm in a hotel. I'm in a nice fancy hotel here in Orlando, and they have an all iMac business center. Now, this causes a lot of schism in Windows users' brains because the word Mac, particularly iMac, and Business Center don't seem to go together, or at least that's their perception. But as we all know, you get more done when you don't have to restart 5 times a day. I'm just saying.
Well, this brings me back to MacNN's founding versus MacNN now.
Yeah.
When MacNN was founded, Apple as a company was floundering. There were 10,000 models in Sears and Service Merchandise and Circuit City and 10 other different electronics chains that don't exist anymore.
Yeah.
Steve Jobs came back, slapped the iMac down and said, this is it. This is how it's going to be.
Yeah, that famous 4 models and 4 models only.
Yeah, and the company started this seismic shift over to this other business model, including the iMac, which was the consumer level machine, and pro level machines, which were the G3, G4 towers. MacNN exists now because, I guess, more for lack of a better word, tenacity in the staff.
Particularly, if I may credit you publicly, your tenacity.
Yeah, well,
You don't operate in a vacuum, but.
Yeah, the thing is I'm not saying I'm Steve Jobs, but the site needed a redirect. Mm-hmm. The site was very dry. The site didn't really address the realities of the day that well.
It was kind of locked in. This is also when I came back to it. It was kind of locked in a, well, we've always done it that way mentality.
It works. This works was the mindset. The thing is, it wasn't working and hadn't been working. But that's okay because we changed it in time to survive.
Yeah. Again, this is kind of an eerie parallel to Apple. Now, Apple is way better than any of us at swinging from vine to vine when the time comes because they prep ahead of time. But
well, I think they're looking 5 or 6 vines ahead.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we needed, was somebody who could both keep the site going now and look ahead. And so, yeah, there's a good parallel there. But I always find it kind of funny that MacNN did, in fact, start at Apple's lowest point.
It did. Yeah, it did. When Apple's survival was day to day, week to week.
Yeah.
MacNN was the voice of the resistance.
What a good idea. I think I'll start a Mac news site now for a company that may be out of business in 90 days.
It wasn't a bad idea because if you were looking for news on products, it was hard to get. Mm-hmm. Jason Snell wrote a piece on this for Vox. If you're not familiar who he is, he helmed Macworld magazine for many, many years.
Yes. Lovely guy.
And he talked about the birth of the Mac Web, and he dropped our name in there and Mac Central and a couple other companies in there, Tidbits.
Very nice. Oh, Mac Central. I used to work for them.
As companies that were the voice of the Mac. Mm-hmm. And he talked about early keynotes where, what are you doing? Don't live blog. If you're taking pictures, get in the back and think about the venues that they have now.
Yeah.
And think about the venue that they're about to open with the new headquarters.
And this is a company where if they decided one year to hold the Worldwide Developer Conference in a stadium, they could.
They could do it. Yeah.
Wouldn't have to be a huge stadium, but they could do it. They have more than enough actual registered developers that if all of them showed up, that would be a problem.
Apple has not forgotten us.
No.
Apple has not forgotten old-time users. Just because they're not giving us a Mac Mini Pro with PCI slots and things like that doesn't mean that they've forgotten about us, but there is a larger force to feed.
Yeah. This is the thing. The Mac websites, the Apple-oriented websites like us, but I'm also speaking of all the other ones, have experienced a changing audience. And this is exactly what Apple saw as well. They foresaw that shift to mobile and they moved fast. I said it once in an article. They're not the only really clever company out there. They just dance through the minefield with more style than most.
Well, the whole argument with the FBI is that exact same thing.
Yeah, exactly.
When Apple got served, said you're going to unlock this phone, Apple had the next day, they had a definitive statement telling the FBI, pack sand, we're going to fight you.
Yeah.
And it took the rest of the industry 10 or 11 days to figure out what they were going to say.
If anything.
Because the responses in the first 5 days were terrible from the other companies.
Well, yeah, not only were they bad, but many of those companies were absent from that discussion. I mean, this case affects almost everybody on Earth, really, ultimately.
Well, it turns out from a report today that Google is dealing with all writs requests and Apple is dealing with all writs requests all over the country.
Yeah, 63 of them and counting. Yep. And a new one we just found out about.
To say nothing of New York City's 208 phones that they want to pop open.
Save that because I've got to put the music on that one because we got to get into that. But before I let this go, I just want to say this. One of the motivating factors behind our recent redesign was the fact that our audience has changed. They're younger, they're mobile, and they're reading on mobile devices, and that's where they want to see us. So we had to come up with a design, and we guess we're still futzing with it a little bit.
Yeah, there's going to be some playing with it for a while still.
Yeah, we're not done.
Don't fret. We're not done yet. But again, if you prefer the classic, it is still available at MacNN.com/classic.
Yeah. But the point I want to make is that this is the thing we have to do. We certainly haven't forgotten our older readers. And by old, I don't mean age. I mean been with us for a while. We love our forum commenters. We love, well, not that guy, but everybody else.
Well, you know what? We love that guy too.
Yeah.
It is a vocal minority that is demanding some of these things. But what I would just like the vocal minority to understand is just because you have your vision of what Apple should deliver doesn't mean that that's what Apple should deliver.
Right. Particularly with us, since we don't have $200 bazillion in the bank. We can't ignore what the market wants. And so we do chase the market. We have to. We try to do it in a way that honors what has come before.
Well, but you know what? It's time to talk about the FBI. So go ahead and play the music.
Yes, we have to get into this. Sorry. I know it seems like it's week after week, but
no, we're not even sorry, because this is, in the 4 years that I've been working here, this is probably, including Apple versus Samsung, including everything else.
Yeah.
This is the single most important issue that Apple as a company and as Apple users have faced in those 4 years.
I think so.
So play the music and let's talk.
All righty, here we go. So there's several new developments on the whole Apple versus the Department of Justice, and thus also the FBI, and just the whole debate about encryption. As you all know, the FBI pulled out of the case that kicked off this entire debate, what we'll call the San Bernardino case. So they were like, oops, okay, bye. Mm-hmm. And kind of left in such a way that you weren't really sure whether they were like, oh, we found a way to crack into it. All right, goodbye, see you later. Or if they were like, oh, we didn't expect this kind of resistance from either Apple or the public. Better rethink this. And went away. But in either case, they went away, and it was kind of bad that happened.
I agree. I think that this is not a court case that should have stopped where it did.
Right. And it won't, as we now know.
Well, this one did.
Yeah, this one did.
The problem with this one stopping where it is now they can use it as a precedent and say, well, this judge gave us an order for Apple to assist us based on all writs, and it never got challenged, so we're going to use it as a precedent.
Yeah.
So
if it was a tactical move on the part of the agency, and I kind of doubt it, but if it was a good one.
No, I'm reasonably certain it was a tactical move in several different ways.
Well, yeah, I'm sure they were trying to save face, but I meant that, as you say, they can claim that it wasn't challenged. Boy, would I love to get an interview with that judge and find out what she thinks now.
Yeah, I don't think we'd get any comment on that.
Probably not appropriate for her to say at this point because it's still going on. She's no Ruth Bader Ginsburg, let's put it that way. Ruth would tell you. But anyway, so now turns out we thought, oh, well, it's over. And I mean, the stock has gone up because Wall Street thinks it's over. The public has gone back to focusing on the presidential campaign because they think it's over. It's not over.
Yeah, we are in the very early days of this, and we talked about this about 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
That it's not going to be as hot and heavy as it was those first couple weeks, man.
No, but everybody's kind of forgotten, among other things, the Brooklyn case. That's a Department of Justice case, not FBI.
That's still rolling on.
That is still ongoing, and it will still be appealed unless the DOJ decide to drop it as well. Putting the lie, I'm sorry, but I have to call it what it is, putting the lie to FBI Director Comey's repeated claim that this was just about one phone and that this wasn't intended to set a precedent. The minute they claim to have a system that works, they turn around and offer it to an Arkansas investigation into a murder case, to be fair, a serious case. But nevertheless, you lasted 2 whole days with that secret.
Well, here's the thing. This is how it's supposed to work, though. They have this technology that they paid a pretty penny to celebrate for.
Although there's some odd questions about that, but go on.
And this is how it's supposed to work. Apple builds a product as securely as they can. Yeah. It's up to law enforcement to deal with it.
That's exactly right. And if they find a flaw, then they're entitled to use that flaw. But Apple will eventually find out what that flaw is and fix it.
Yeah, I'm not convinced that the Celebrate technology works that well with the Secure Enclave.
Well, we're about to find out because, as I was going to mention, there's a new case that's just come up in Boston that involves an iPhone 6 Plus running iOS 9.1. So it has the secure enclave and almost the latest operating system on it. So we're going to find out, and maybe that's why they're in court. Maybe this technique does not work on those kinds of things.
The Arkansas issue is with an iPod and an iPhone.
Yeah.
Given the fact that the murders happened in June of last year, I find it not likely that it is the most recent generation of iPod Touch, which means it's probably running iOS 6 or 7.
Yeah. So they should have no trouble getting into that.
There should be no issue with law enforcement with a tool to delve on in there. I'm willing to bet that the iPhone in question isn't much newer, just based on it's been in the FBI's hands since last June, which is another problem with some of this. When the phones crap out, when they run out of juice, and they ultimately will, then there's no more iCloud backup. There's a lot of other things that kick in once the phone has been completely powered down. As far as, well, now you need to enter your password, and there's no immediate telling if repeated tries of the password is going to wipe out the contents of the phone. I'm willing to bet that the San Bernardino phone only had a 4-digit passcode on it.
Yeah.
And I'm also willing to bet that deleting after failed passwords wasn't enabled. And I think that's why it only took a couple days for Celebrite to deal with the contents of the phone.
Yeah, I think what Celebrite really came up with was a way to verify to the FBI that those things weren't in place. And that was all the FBI needed. I mean, that really was at the heart of it. They were afraid to proceed because they could have destroyed the evidence. Once Celebrite came in and said, nope, here's proof that you won't. Oh, they were like, oh, okay.
Well, I'm also willing to bet, and I'm on record for saying this, that there's nothing on the phone in the first place.
Well, now, this is one of the several odd questions that come about. It turns out, and just got reported on Friday for sure, that it is in fact Celebrite that's helping them. Celebrite is an Israeli company that has been under contract to the FBI for years. How did the FBI not know that this company could help them out? That is super weird.
Yeah, when Celebrite's name came up right after the FBI said that they had outside help, that's my BS detector started going off. Because there's no way that Celebrite hadn't had a chance to consult on the phone in the first place. So that was the proof I needed to say, well, yeah, this is clearly about setting precedent to force Apple to do the FBI's bidding here.
Right. And I still think that, although the most recent API report, I think it was actually Wall Street Journal, that said, okay, this is actually Celebrite. We're sure of it now. They went on to say that Celebrite is using some hacker who's found a flaw. So this is maybe it's not the NAND imaging that we thought it was.
I don't think so. I think that's a load of crap.
I do too.
I think that it's the existing Celebrite technology, and it worked because the no secure enclave on the 5C.
Right. But then the real test will come out. But the other odd question about this is, okay, let's accept the idea that the FBI has in fact cracked into that San Bernardino iPhone 5C. Fine. If they were to then come out and say, here's what we got. Look at this. You see, we need this tool because look at this valuable information that we got. That would support their case and probably shift public opinion back over to their side again, after several of their claims have been kind of disproven and they got their lunch handed to them at that congressional hearing. All right. But anyway, even if they couldn't refer to the specifics, they could have just said, yeah, we found stuff, valuable stuff. We're going to act on that.
Well, they could say that anyway.
I know, they could say that anyway. But they haven't said a word about what they found.
They haven't said word one, which
means, to me, my opinion, they didn't find nothing.
I think that if they had found anything really and truly actionable, I think they would have at least said there was valuable information gleaned from the contents of the phone.
Right. Because that would weaken Apple's defense and strengthen their case, and they haven't said it. And maybe it's because there's a line that even the FBI won't cross when it comes to making false claims, and that they just found nothing, which is exactly what the San Bernardino County Health Department employees told them they would find. Nothing.
Right.
So the thing that bugs me the most about this is that this whole case was ultimately on false pretense. It was presented to us on false pretenses. I can't speak for the judge, but if I was the judge, I'd be royally pissed.
It really wasn't presented under false pretenses. It was, like with any other court case, it's strategic omissions. You don't find precedent for the defense if you're the prosecution.
Yeah.
You use your own precedent. You pick and choose what facts you're going to present. I'm not saying that the FBI didn't pick this particular case because it was emotionally charged. That's not what I'm saying. because clearly they decided to test the political waters on this one because they could hang the terrorism badge on it.
Yep.
But I'm not going to say that they put on their big hats and twirled their mustaches and said, well, we're going to pull a fast one right here. I don't think that was the case at all.
I hope you're right. I really do. But the fact that they took Apple to court without telling them speaks to me that they thought they could just use the terrorism booga booga term, scare the judge, and get what they wanted quickly.
I also don't think that's the first time that that's happened.
No.
The Apple warrant canary disappeared a couple years ago.
Yes. And wasn't it? Oh, Reddit today.
And Reddit today also, their warrant canaries are also gone.
Yeah. For those of you who don't know what we're talking about here, we're not talking about actual canaries. We're talking about some language in the disclaimers that these big companies use that say something to the effect of, we have not been served with any classified, warrants, secret warrants that we're not allowed to talk about. We have not been served with any of those. And that language is on the website until it's not. And when it's not, that means they have.
Yep.
So that's what we're talking about with the warrant canary. In the Boston case, I want to talk about the Boston case for a second. This is a new case that just came up. The whole thing's under seal, but the ACLU managed to get some of the documents freed up, and that's the only reason we actually know it's happening. This is back to the FBI, and they are again trying to use the All Writs Act. This is the one with the more recent iPhone, and this is about a gang-related case, almost certainly something to do with drugs. But so we had the terrorism case. In Arkansas, we have a murder investigation. In Boston, we have a drug case. Can you see the ladder? Can you see the steps of the ladder going down and down and down and down? Eventually, it'll be part and parcel. Anybody who is arrested doing anything suspicious will have their phone taken and examined.
The FBI is going to have to pick and choose its battles carefully on what it's going to spray its technology all over. Because at some point, they are going to have to, in an open courtroom, discuss the technology behind gathering the data off the phones.
Right, if it exists. There's still some people who are like, nope, they've just made this up to pull out of the case.
I don't think so. I think that if they haven't gotten data off the phone, I think they've gotten a technology demo where it's going to work, and they say, well, we'll just hammer it out.
Well, my position, I was telling you what some people have said. My position is that they have a way to crack into some phones.
Yeah.
Which is along the lines of what you were saying, the ones without secure enclave, without running the latest operating system. And so whether or not we get it, as a former FBI senior official told the Wall Street Journal, whether or not we ever find out what this technique is depends on how many phones they can unlock with it.
Yeah, I agree.
So, yeah, I think that guy was right on the money. So in the Boston case, it's about gangs. That slippery slope is already being painted and presented to us. Now, the one thing that gives me hope about this is that the motion was unsealed just yesterday, but the case has been going on for some time. So I'm assuming that they started this action in Boston before they vacated the one in San Bernardino. And so this one may still be rolling downhill, but it's, no longer being driven.
I believe you're correct.
And, they may do the same in there because, as the guy from the Electronic Frontier Foundation said, he said, quote, "My instinct is that the FBI isn't eager to the mat with Apple on this same issue again. Because while the crimes here are serious, we don't know that this case would have the same resonance with the public that a terrorism case would." And I think that's very telling. I think he's onto something there. Hopefully the judges in these various cases, the one in Brooklyn, the one in Arkansas, well, the one that will eventually be involved in Arkansas, the one in Boston, will take a look at what's happening overall and come to some conclusions about where we ought to go with this. One more request for Apple assistants to decrypt a phone came from another completely different source.
Yeah, this one, there's no chance this guy's going to get Apple's help.
No. But it's almost like a Spanish soap opera or something where something really dramatic happens at the least possible expected moment. So you have all these crises going on. And then an Italian father has asked Apple's Tim Cook directly for assistance in unlocking his deceased son's iPhone. The heartstrings, they're being pulled. The son died from cancer. It's terrible. And, this case could resonate a lot more with the public, I think.
I don't think so.
Well,
yeah.
Except for a couple of things I'm coming to. But you can sort of understand, my son died all of a sudden, and I want to see his last photos. I want to see his last thoughts. I want to see all that. I think a lot of people, especially parents, can relate to this, except there's a couple of little caveats here.
Yeah.
Mike, what tell them all about it.
Well, good on the family because they put the dad's thumbprint in the phone.
Yes.
Bad on the family that the unlock code was not provided by the the sun.
Yes.
So the guy said, when I found his phone, the battery was dead.
And or it would have been off for a couple of days. That's all it takes.
It just needs to be off.
Yeah.
And that will require passcode entry even after Touch ID is used.
Yeah.
So by not having that password, now there's a problem.
Yeah. Now they can't get into the phone. This was a 13-year-old boy who succumbed to cancer. It's a very sad story, but...
It is. It's tragic, and it's awful. And I've spoken on the podcast before that I have a childhood friend that is in a similar situation with a locked phone.
Yeah.
And it's heartbreaking. And I'm not saying it's not.
No.
And I've also said what my position is on this.
Yeah. But there's two things that we want to mention about this story. First of all, the son, his name is Dama, was diagnosed with bone cancer and then passed away 9 months, I think it was.
I think it's 18 months.
Yeah.
I think it's very nearly 2 years, I think.
In any event, there was quite a bit of time between I have cancer and I might die and his passing. So there was plenty of time for them to say, well, tell me your passcode, or better yet, give me your phone. I'm going to make a copy of it, all the contents of it while you're still here. I understand they want to get up right at the last minute, but the lesson to be learned here is not Apple should have a back door so that grieving parents can obtain their child's last contents on their phones.
Yeah.
The lesson here is talk to your family members. My wife and I don't know each other's passcodes for our phones. And all of this business that we've seen just recently, and particularly this story, has inspired me to fix that.
Yeah, but on the other hand, your phones are controlled through your MacBook Air, are they not?
In my case, it's a MacBook Pro.
Okay.
Yes, it syncs with a MacBook Pro.
Does your wife have access to the MacBook Pro because your phone is trusted on the computer?
No. We have a kind of funny marriage. We keep our stuff separate because we want each one of us to have a certain reservoir of privacy. So, for example, she can plan a birthday party for me, and I don't know.
Well, here's the thing, though. I mean, I don't have my family's email passwords.
Right.
But I am the de facto network manager in the house.
Yeah. And you have many more family members than I do. I just have the one. But it has dawned on us that, say, if something happened to one of us tomorrow, less important about preserving our iTunes library or my iTunes library. It's more about there might be some very important financial or personal data that needs to get into the hands of the other person. And so we do need that security. We interviewed a few episodes back a lady from 1Password, the password company.
Yeah.
And they have a service called 1Password for Families that is designed exactly around this idea. But there is also, even without using that particular service, there is also things you can do. And the one thing is contingency planning. That's really the bottom line here. Contingency planning. And particularly in the case of this Italian family that had time to do it and just didn't, although we understand that the appeal to Apple is a very heartbreaking one. Not only can Apple not help them, really and truly can't help them even if they wanted to, but they should not have that obligation. That this is exactly why they build the security in here, is because they don't want to be involved in stuff like this.
Yeah.
And it's really not their place. They're right. It's really not their place to do it. Not that they don't care, just that they,
No, I think Apple cares about it a great deal, but I also think that it's not something that they can bend to.
Yeah, exactly. So if you get nothing else out of this week's podcast, please go and talk to your family members about how to access certain documents or certain important information. Maybe set up a shared Dropbox folder that's password protected, but all the members of the family have it, or something.
This is a very 21st century problem.
Yeah. And it is a sort of new area. When my father passed, he had a little file folder with all of his passwords and with all of his accounts and with all of the, every stock he held and who he held it with and, where the bank accounts were and all that stuff. He had thought about his passing and prepared for it. It saved us a heck of a lot of time. And it's something that I confess I have not been a good adult. I have not adulted in that fashion yet. I need to do something like that myself.
Well, let's move on to the next terrible thing that we've discovered and play the music.
Yeah. All righty. Here we go. Something a little less terrible, but still terrible.
It's still pretty bad.
Yeah. All right. Here we go. Moving on. Oh, just like the plague. Kids, the internet is not always full of good people, and you have to be careful out there. And we're discovering that not only do you have to be careful out there, but sometimes the bad actors come back. A while back, how long ago was it, Mike?
It was October. We published the article in October.
Yeah, we published a story warning you about this one particular set of Mac Bundle and, for that matter, PC Bundle organizations. They're all owned by the same person, but they go under a lot of different names, that were not paying the developers who participated in the bundles. That character is back after being caught out, and I'm shocked more that any developers would sign up with this guy again.
What shocks me more is we were the only place to talk about this, and yet they sent us an email to try and promote the bundle.
Well, we're on that mass mailing list. They don't remember. And, this is the thing. They're trading on the idea that we've all forgotten about it, right? Because the news moves on and there's lots of things to think about.
6 months to the day. We published the article 6 months to the day.
I know. Now, I want to start by saying, and this is important, that most of the Mac Bundle deals you see on and around, especially on our site, we've checked them out directly as a result of this, actually.
Yep.
If you see a Mac Bundle, chances are they're good, they pay their developers, they're popular. Gosh, we haven't seen anything from Mac Heist in a while. I wonder whatever happened to them.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It's a good question.
But, our pals at Mac Update do some great bundles, and there are lots of other legit developers. But we'd like to encourage you to visit our site and just do a search in the search bar for Mac Bundler or Bundlecult. And you'll find our stories about this, the new one and the old one.
We're going to link it in the podcast notes. But the upshot is Bundlecult, Mac Bundler, and a couple other bundle sites that had design elements and things like that. They're run by a person or people with a variety of names. It's all spelled out in the article. I'm not going to go into super amount of detail. And they just started a new bundle today.
Yeah.
Again, after 6 months of quiet, they decided, let's try it again. I reinitiated contact with the developers that were affected last year, and they have not been paid.
Right.
And some of those developers reached out to the developers in the current bundle, and they're reacting with a bit of shock and fear.
Yeah. And we feel bad because some of the apps involved in this latest bundle are good apps. They're apps that we've reviewed and we like. And yet we just want to scream, but you're not going to get paid.
Well, we did scream in October that you're not going to get paid. And in fact, if you search the word Bundlecult on Google, we are the second hit after bundlecult.com.
Oh, good.
So, it's not currently loading because of our SSL problem. But it's, it's there.
Yeah. Just take the S out.
Yeah. If a page loads funny for you, instead of HTTPS, just scratch off the S.
Yeah.
And it'll load fine.
Should load fine.
Anyway, that's a separate issue for a separate day.
Yeah. We'll fix it, we swear.
But Bundlecult, bad. Bundle Hunt is fine. Okay, let's be perfectly clear.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned this.
This is Mac Bundler and Bundlecult are the same people that are not always paying their developers.
Right.
And that's not cool.
No, absolutely not cool. Because, already these developers are taking a loss as it is, right? They don't get paid very much when they participate in the bundles, but they feel like this will help them get noticed. It will help them get attention. It's sort of publicity. So they're willing to take the hit. But then to not get paid at all.
Now all of a sudden you're on the hook for 10,000 licenses that you're providing support for and you didn't get paid for them.
See, that's what we're talking about. So remember, Bundle Hunt, good.
Bundlecult, bad.
Also, Mac Bundler. They go by a few other names. We listed them on the site. You'll see them in the show notes. So please do pay attention and spend your money with the legitimate sources. That's what we always say.
And here's the deal. If you're the Bundlecult people, I want to hear your side of the story.
Yeah.
I've been trying to get in touch with you for 6 months.
Yeah.
We do want to talk to you. We're not going to string you up and run you out of town. We're going to talk to you, and we're going to give you a chance to express your side of the story. And if you have anything saying that you have paid these developers, we'd like to see it.
Yeah, because that's really what we're concerned about. Maybe they've changed their ways and they're going to be great from now on. The fact that they don't respond to their emails isn't giving us a lot of confidence, but you never know. Remember, bundle shop carefully is what we're trying to say. Bottom.
Yep.
Next up. Oracle versus Google.
Here we go again.
Here we go again. This is the Android world's Apple versus Samsung. It just never completely dies. But I have to admit, this is, to me, an even more fascinating case. because here we're talking about something that both companies feel passionately they can prove is or is not true. Oracle got the chance, they actually lost this case outright a while back, but they got the chance to start over and to try and make the case again. And so now they are asking from Google, and the bottom line here is that Oracle feels that much of Google's Android operating system is borrowed from Java, which they own. All the Apple people who have been following the Android Apple thing may sense a bit of deja vu there. Essentially what Oracle is saying is that the actual code is borrowed from them and the actual look is borrowed from iOS. I seem to remember a case involving Microsoft that was something along those lines too. Nevertheless, the latest wrinkle is that Oracle is now asking for $9.3 billion with a B from Google because, let's face it, Android is huge.
I just want to get this out of my system. The reason why the judge punted this away, and I love this is the best thing ever, is because Judge Alsup said, well, I've done some coding in the past.
Yes.
And he relied completely on that to make his decisions in the case, and that makes me smile. I don't know how much coding experience he has. Frankly, I don't think it's enough. But just the fact that he's got the audacity to come out and say, well, I've done some coding. I can help decide this multi-billion-dollar issue just based on the strength of that.
Well, to be fair,
go Judge Alsup. You go.
William Alsup, the judge that we're talking about, that puts him at 1,000,000 times more experience than almost any other judge that has ever heard any of these technology cases.
Yeah, okay.
Because he does, by having done some coding, just like I used to do some coding way back in the day, we at least understand the fundamental principles of programming and, to a lesser extent, to technology. So that, believe me, that's like saying if two chefs were fighting in court and Judge Alsup said, well, yeah, but I make my own food all the time.
I bake waffles.
That still puts him a mile above all the other judges who only get their food ordered in and don't even know that it comes from animals.
True enough. What the key of this is going to be is, yes, Google used procedure names and variable names for interoperability, but they claim that they reverse engineered the Java API as opposed to stealing it outright. There are some really fine hairs that are going to get split here, but $9 billion? No. There's not $9 billion of hairs to split here.
Well, it's unlikely that they'll ever get that much. Just ask Apple about that.
Yeah.
But they're asking for it because they've calculated this based on the percentage of how much Android is out there. And this includes Android versions that Google has no control over, like in China, or that don't use Google services. But, ultimately, Google is responsible for everything Android does, or at least that's the case that's being made here. And so it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out.
And again, this is going to be another one of those not short events.
No, this is one of those days, and there are a lot of these days where I wish Steve Jobs was still alive, because I'd sure like to ask him what he thinks about this, because his perspective might actually be quite different than what you'd think it would be. He's the man who said he wanted to commit thermonuclear war on Google because he felt it had stolen its look from iOS. But I wonder how he'd feel about the actual code and this whole issue of, is code speech? And if it is, can it be trademarked or copyrighted in a certain way? If there's only one way to accomplish a thing and somebody copyrights that, does that mean no one else can do that thing? There's a lot of complicated issues in there. And
yeah, but none of that is actually going to get resolved in this case. It's going to get discussed. It's going to get bandied about. It's going to be mentioned that the patent law isn't clear, but it's ultimately not going to be resolved. It's going to take a mass overhaul of the U.S. copyright and patent system to deal with that.
Yeah. Well, another wrinkle in this particular case is that there had been some astroturfing going on where I believe it was Google, but it might have been Oracle or both of them, that were paying online commenters to decide one way or the other. So that brings a whole new wrinkle to the whole thing. It's going to be interesting to see how it turns out. But the one thing that I would say is, if you're going to follow this case or you're going to root for one side or another, don't do it just because you like one and don't like the other. If court cases were all about, they did something wrong, no, we didn't, they would be much shorter than they are. The problem is that all of these kinds of cases raise new gray issues that are much harder to sort out. Things just aren't as black and white as we like to think they are. That's the bottom line. Time once again for Rumor Roundup. Holy cow. I love the rumor mill. I really do. First of all, it's darn reliable, constantly coming out with new stuff.
I'm glad you like it.
The other thing I like about it is that they're not content to just talk about the next probable thing that would happen. The rumor community has essentially decided they already know what's going to happen at WWDC or just before it. We're going to get a refresh of the MacBook family. And a preview of iOS 10 and OS 10, which may be called Mac OS or whatever. Oh, we should talk about that. Anyway, they've moved on. They're not even concerned with this summer. They've leapfrogged all the way into fall.
Yeah, we're just going to skip that whole thing. We're just going to go straight to the iPhone 7 and how fancy whammerdine it's going to be.
But not even that. There's a lot that they think they know about what the iPhone 7 is going to be like. So they have moved on to 2017, ladies and gentlemen. Nice. This is really forecasting. Holy cow. One analyst in particular, Ming-Chi Kuo from KGI, Mike's favorite, has outlined a whole set of things that he expects to happen in the phone after the iPhone 7. That's right, after it. What's that? You thought it would be the iPhone 7S? Wrong! Well, who knows what they'll actually call it, but if they call it the iPhone 7S, it'll be the most different iPhone 7S ever. Apple is mixing it up, changing things. Cats are sleeping with dogs. Who knows what's going on? So the iPhone 7 that we're supposed to get this fall is, if you follow the rumor mill, going to look almost exactly like the iPhone 6S. What? Essentially another iPhone 6S? Yes. It'll look basically the same, a little bit changes here and there, possibly a dual camera system, obviously lots of upgraded internals, but that's what the 6S was. And so now we're going to get another one of those this year, the rumor mill says. And the big changes and the huge form factor and the totally different design that we were expecting this fall is happening April of 2017, according to Ming-Chi Kuo. And some others have said, yeah, sure, why not?
Why not?
Yeah. Among the changes, yes, the iPhone 7 this fall will drop the headphone jack and run the latest operating system and probably have upgraded cameras, and that's all nice. But the one in 2017 will use the curved glass like Samsung does on the AMO LED, however you pronounce that, type of screen, which is, to be fair, Apple is using those types of screens right now on the Apple Watch. So certainly plausible. Naturally, no headphone jack. Naturally. But the other thing is it will be a full screen display. No more mechanical home button. The home button will be the screen.
This is not the first time he's said this.
Oh, no. And that's one of the things that we took some time out in this latest rumor roundup to talk about. I want to be fair. He has both a good track record and a bad track record. He has a good track record of calling things out very early on. He was the first one to say that we know of that there would be an Apple 5-based design coming out in April or March, I believe it was originally. So props to that. But he got almost all the details of it wrong. So there seems to be this kind of, Mike has a very good theory, and I agree with it. I think that Ming-Chi he might or might not have some sources somewhere. But I think the thing where his knowledge is really coming from is careful observation of the companies that Apple buys. That seems to be where his insight is coming from. Some of the things that he has said that he believes are going to happen, such as iris scanning or facial recognition in this 2017 iPhone, that comes from the fact that Apple has bought companies that do that.
Yeah.
Emotion and Face Shift both do that. This whole thing about the iPhone's going to get a dual camera system, at least in some models, possibly as early as this fall, that comes from the fact that they bought a company called Lynx that makes, you'll never guess, dual camera systems for smartphones. Hello. So I think that this is more where his insight is. And of course, some of this turns out to be right, I'm not dismissing it. I'm not telling you don't pay attention to him. Don't hold your breath on the details, but it's always fun to see what he says is going to come down the pike because it's often very surprising. He made quite a few waves last week by saying that this future iPhone that we're talking about was going to go back to the all glass design of the iPhone 4. Remember those?
No, I don't think so.
I don't think so either. But my favorite part of that is he clearly never dropped one.
Yeah.
Because if he did, he'd know that we're never going to do that.
Here's the thing. In a previous gig, I was given a wood back panel to review for the iPhone 4. And realizing that the iPhone 4 back panel was glass, I just left it on after the review.
Right.
In fact, it's still sitting up there. It's in my wire baskets of doom up here with, let's see, it's got an iPod Touch, it's got an iPhone 4, an iPhone 5, an iPhone 3G, a 40 gigabyte FireWire hard drive. It saved the phone. It saved that wood panel, prevented damage to the phone from impacts because it wasn't a glass back anymore.
As someone who has never dropped their phone to the point where it broke, and I did have an iPhone 4, I always keep my iPhones in a case. They're almost never without the case, but I don't keep it in an OtterBox or anything like that. It's just an ordinary silicone lip type of case or one of Apple's cases. But as someone who has rarely dropped a phone, I have to tell you, I don't think I have any friends in the town that I live in who haven't dropped their phone and broken it at least once. I always thought of myself as very klutzy, but every single one of them has come to me and say, hey, broke the back of the phone. We got a place in town where I can get that fixed. And luckily, of course, I know where those places are. But
I swear, and I'm not getting paid to say this, I swear by the NewGuard KX series of cases.
Yeah.
I've got one currently on my iPhone SE, which we're not talking about this week. We'll talk about it next week.
Yes, next week.
And my kids on the original iPad mini have the same NewGuard case on the minis, and they're a very rambunctious 6 and almost 4. And we have had no casualties.
Yeah, I think that's as much of a testimony as you can make right there, particularly in the hands of children. The glass body of the iPhone 4 in particular was just notorious.
Yeah.
I thought the iPhone 5 and the 5S was a much improved design exactly because of that, because it moved to metal and aluminum.
I completely agree with you on that.
Much better design. Even though the iPhone 6 and 6S, some of them have detractors, it being super easy to break is not one of the criticisms.
No. There was the bogus Ben gate.
Yeah. The idea that we're going to move to an all glass, glass on both the front and back, we just don't see.
Nope.
Some of this stuff is very good educated guesses, are very likely to happen, like the AMOLED display, very likely to happen at some point. The power efficiency is just too tempting. There's also been some talk recently about we could make the screen larger without making the phone actually bigger by just removing the chins, making, for example, the home button part of the screen. Then you can just make a bigger screen. To some extent, I think that makes sense. It'll probably arrive at some point. The whole facial recognition, iris scanning, yeah, maybe. But I always think back to Apple Maps when somebody talks about this. Apple has bought, I don't know how many mapping companies since Apple Maps came out.
Oh, man.
And yes, all of those mapping companies have contributed to making Apple Maps better and better. But nothing that has happened since Apple Maps first came out has been revolutionary. That's what I think about. When Apple buys these technology companies, they bought one that was specifically supposed to help the App Store searches zero in on what you really wanted. Didn't happen. I can't even begin to tell you. It must be at least a half dozen mapping companies that Apple has bought that were specifically focused on transit. And at the moment, we have about 8 U.S. cities that have transit maps.
Yeah.
So that's going pretty slow. So the thing I think I have an issue with these general predictions based on companies that Apple buys is that incorporating whatever benefit they do get out of it takes years in most cases, it seems to me. So I think that a lot of this stuff will come true someday, or it'll be very different than what you think. I want to close this segment with that because we've talked about this before, but another one of our favorite pundits, Gene Munster, for years, we talked about this last week, predicted that there would be an Apple HD TV. Turns out he was right, sort of. There is an Apple HD TV, and it is ginormous, 37 feet across.
In the back of new Apple stores.
Yes, in the back of new Apple stores. And apparently this thing is awesome. I'm arranging, as we speak, literally a trip to try and go see one of these as soon as possible. But it isn't like we've all seen big television displays, but we can usually see that it's, 9 big HD TVs stacked together to make one big picture. And there's usually some lines that sort of tell you where the dividers are. This thing is one big image. And I don't know how they do it. As far as I'm concerned, it's wizards in the back. But
okay.
So, Gene, you got your Apple HD TV, but it wasn't what you thought. And that's the lesson, is that very often we see Apple do action A and we believe that it will lead to thing B happening. But usually it ends up being thing F.
Yep. The Apple car is going to turn out like that. Mark my words.
Yep. I think you're absolutely right. Moving on. Speaking of cars, a little side note. I just want to mention this real quick. Tesla has announced the Tesla 3. And this is a real moment for them. You can't understate it. When this is a game changer, and I feel like this is for Tesla what the iPhone was for Apple. This is a big, big deal. It's the first car they've ever made that comes down to the realm of normal people would say, yeah, maybe I could afford that. Maybe I could. Although there's already been some talk about how the design doesn't look quite finished and blah, blah, blah. The idea is that it is now possible for an ordinary person to think about maybe owning a Tesla. That's a breakthrough. That's a huge breakthrough for them.
$35,000.
$35,000, but here's the thing that I don't think got nearly enough play. In the United States, the first, I think, 200,000 or so of these cars that can get sold will have a special tax credit applied to them that brings that down by, something like $8,000.
Wow, nice.
So this comes in at about $28,000, actually, if you move quick. The thing that really tips me off that this is a big breakthrough is Elon Musk was talking about the car on Friday and said they already have over 100,000 reservations for this thing. These are obviously existing Tesla owners that are looking to upgrade. So he's not only capturing an upgrade cycle, but he's got a product that people who never gave Tesla a second thought other than thinking, that's a neat technology company. Now they might be able to own a piece of it. This could be huge. I wish them the very best, and I hope that this will break through. Not just Tesla, but electric cars in general. They're doing okay, but there could be more of a push. In Europe and in Canada, where I live, electric cars are a thing. In America, they're still kind of a novelty. I would love to see that change. The other thing that he said, and this is the second part of the breakthrough, is that they have a plan to double the number of electric charging stations in the United States. That'll do it, because that's the other problem. And as we often like to do, at the end of each episode, we like to bring in William Gallagher, who has got a new App of the Week. Again! William, what have you got for us this week? What is the App of the Week?
Come on, tell us about the new Omni product.
This new one is called just Omni, and it does everything.
Anyway, go ahead, William.
Yes, well, if this were an ordinary week, I'd be saying App of the Week, Fantastical 2.2. Of course I would. It's gorgeous and it's new for OS X. Just go get it. App of the Week, fantastic stuff. However, given the kind of anniversary mood of the times, I want to instead pick out an App of the Week that's been around for a very long time, and actually it doesn't get any respect. Apple Mail. I use this every week, it's every hour practically. It is solid, reliable, it doesn't have every feature going, but what it has, it does well. It gets picked on because it has to be. If you want to sell an alternative email client, you've got to stop people using the regular one. So, of course, any deficiencies are picked up in this and not so much in others. It has faults, it has criticisms, but I keep using it, and it's the best mail client I have. I mean, I used Outlook before this, so come on. Apple Mail. It's free, and in fact, not only is it free, but you've already got it. So you've already got the App of the Week, and I think it's actually an extraordinary piece of software that we've ignored for far too long. However, from next week, we'll go on to ignoring it again and pick something else.
Well, that about wraps it up for episode 57 of the MacNN podcast. As always, it's been a pleasure to share a little hour with you, talking about all the latest tech news, giving it our spin. We love hearing from you about what you think about it. That's what our comment forums are for, and you can also contact us directly and let us know what you think.
Yeah, send us an email, tips@macnn.com.
Yeah, we'd love to hear from you. On behalf of the entire staff, I'm the editor, Charles Martin. Over there in Virginia, managing editor, Mike.
Hello, everybody.
We didn't do an intro for you at all. We just got into it.
We're just rolled. But at this point, you should know who I am.
Yeah, there was just too much to talk about. We couldn't, no time. Anyway, join us next week if you would, please. Let everybody know, and we'll see you then. Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Goodbye.